So in this video we're going to be talking about the Phantom Menace. How powerful exactly is the Phantom Menace? And by how powerful is the Phantom Menace, I mean how powerful are the Force users of the Phantom Menace and the people from around that era. So immediately what we've got going on with the Phantom Menace is you've got the Chosen One, and the Chosen One's coming because the darkness has gotten too strong. The darkness has never been this strong before, so the Force has intervened and spawned this Chosen One into being. George makes note of this when he talks about the Phantom Menace darkness and calls the Phantom Menace darkness the greatest despair. So that's an all-time quote there. He's talking about, of all time, this is the worst darkness, this is the worst that's ever been. And the reason the darkness has gotten so bad is because the light side has gotten too powerful, the light side has ruled for too long. So, in the natural order of balance, the darkness rises to extinguish this light. Light is weaved into the living force by the Jedi, the more midichlorians in the galaxy basically, able to trained and able to draw that light out, the more power in the galaxy. And I've done a video on this, the living force web. And so George Lucas calls the Phantom Menace era the prime of the Jedi. And to demonstrate that this is the prime of the Jedi, the dueling is a lot faster and more aggressive and a lot more powerful.
Okay, come forward a bit. Yeah. Okay, when you ready?
Ready.
Okay.
Action.
I was looking for a kind of sword fighting that was reminiscent of what was in the movies that we'd already done, but a more energized version of it. Because we'd actually never seen real Jedis at work. We'd only seen, you know, old men and crippled half droid, half men, and young boys that had learned from these people. So to see a Jedi fighting in the prime of the Jedi, I wanted it to be a much more energetic and faster version of what we've been doing.
But essentially it's not a case of just like, oh, they had better technology so they made everyone faster in the prequels. They were faster in the prequels to demonstrate that these people in the prequels are more powerful than the people in the original trilogy. And you know, Ben Kenobi references this in A New Hope when he says, before the Dark Times, before the Empire, the Jedi were the most powerful force in the galaxy, and they were for 1,000 generations.
An elegant weapon for a more civilized age. For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic. Before the Dark Times. Before the Empire.
So these Jedi have been growing more powerful for 1,000 generations, until eventually, in the prime of the Jedi, they've cast too much light, they're too powerful.
Since the fall of Darth Bane more than a millennium ago, there have been hundreds of thousands of Jedi. Hundreds of thousands of Jedi feeding the light with each work of their hands, with each breath, with every beat of their hearts, bringing justice, building civil society, radiating peace, acting out of selfless love for all living things. Jedi create light, but the Sith do not create darkness. They merely use the darkness that is always there, that has always been there.
And they allude to the threat of this on Mortis, of course.
Too much dark or light would be the undoing of life as you understand it.
So the Jedi have cast too much light. There is too much light in the galaxy, so the darkness rises. The greatest despair comes about because there is too much light in the galaxy. And that is the natural order of things, you know, that is the way of balance. You know, the light has gotten too strong, so the darkness rises to extinguish that light.
The Force provides, Sidious, as nature provides more male beings in the aftermath of war. The Force, ever mindful of balance, provides beings strong in the dark side when light has ruled for too long. This Zabrak bodes well.
These are all natural to sentient beings. The legacy of the jungle, our inheritance from the dark. I'm sorry, Master Windu, but I'm not sure I follow you. Are you saying, to follow your metaphor, that the Jedi have cast too much light?
So the light side has ruled for too long, so the Force starts spawning in these dark side, demonic monsters like Darth Maul to just come and wipe out that light. Darth Maul in the physical aspect, as in he's the tool that's going to bring about the extinction of the light, and Darth Sidious in the way as in he's going to be the mind behind how that is accomplished. So Darth Maul is the physical and Darth Sidious is the mind. And I've gone over how all of this works in my Rule of Two Master and Apprentice relationship video, and that all applies to Sidious and Darth Maul in the Phantom Menace, so you can go and check that out if you want. And so basically what that means is Darth Maul is gonna, he's gonna fight, he's gonna be the lightsaber, whereas Darth Sidious is gonna be a strategist, he's gonna be the mind. And so they're both roughly equals at this point. It's maybe a tiny bit too early to reveal the Sith. They probably could have waited, until the Sith, had a bit more of an advantage over the Jedi. But nonetheless, we have the prime of the Jedi, and then we have the greatest despair to counter that. And then we have the Chosen One who, is the test. Who's going to get the Chosen One? Who is going to get to him first? And I'll cover this in depth in another video, but I've covered it briefly in my other video here. But we've got the prime of the Jedi versus the greatest despair. It all comes down to this. This is the penultimate conflict of the entire galaxy, in which the entire galaxy is at risk. And of course it doesn't conclude in the Phantom Menace, it goes on till, Revenge of the Sith, Return of the Jedi. But this is where it all begins, the Sith revealing themselves in the Phantom Menace. After a millennia of hiding, in order to grow in every aspect of the Force, whilst allowing the Jedi to grow complacent and arrogant, which in turn fuels the dark side and the Sith's own power. And this is the natural order of things, this is the natural way of balance. It's the Jedi's negative karma building up. The longer they grow complacent and arrogant and more powerful. The more powerful they get, the more the darkness just builds up to counter that, since the Jedi aren't following the will of the Force. They've gone off track, so the Force naturally brings them back on track by having the darkness rise and wipe them out. The homeostasis of the Force is balanced, so the darkness rises more powerful than ever in the Phantom Menace. The Sith return more powerful than ever, because the light side has gotten to that point as well. The prime of the Jedi needs to be extinguished, so comes the greatest despair. And the Force brings that darkness into the galaxy by spawning these demonic beings like Darth Maul and Darth Sidious and Darth Plagueis. So it's Darth Maul that reveals the Sith. It's Darth Maul that is proof that the Sith are back and more powerful than ever before. And make no mistake, the Sith of the movies are indeed the most powerful Sith of all time. Despite whatever cool feats you might see depicted by, past Sith in the comics or the video games, it's part of the core narrative of the Star Wars movies that this is the biggest threat of all time to the galaxy, that these Sith are the greatest despair, that this is the prime of the Jedi. It's part of the core narrative of Star Wars itself. So, Darth Nihilus draining a planet in Knights of the Old Republic doesn't really change that narrative, doesn't really have authority to change that narrative. Particularly the narratives within the movies, which, of course, is the highest authority within the continuity. Depictions of power, such as that, are typically just derived from the medium being more exaggerated. The Force Unleashed, where the Force is amped up, original Clone Wars, where everyone's blowing like armies of battle droids away. You can't do that in the movies. And that's just a difference in the medium, where the Force is exaggerated for enjoyment or gameplay purposes. So the very point of the Bayonet line is to have the Sith master all of the darkness and then come back stronger than ever. The official Phantom Menace Visual Dictionary, updated and expanded, talks about this directly and says that, the purpose of Darth Bane going into hiding was that when the Sith revealed themselves, they'd come back stronger. This is a core part of the narrative of the Phantom Menace. Then they talk about this in Clone Wars Season 6, when Yoda's on the Force planet and Qui-gon, who's omniscient by the way, tells Yoda that the darkness growing has always been happening. So the darkness has been growing since time's inception. It's always been growing.
Such darkness. Such evil. When will this happen?
It is happening right now. It has always been happening. With each day the Clone War wages, evil is growing in its power. What you felt in the cave is merely a portion of what the dark side now holds.
Such power.
And that is synonymous with the son of Mortis constantly getting more powerful. You know, they say this in Mortis at the beginning of the episode.
The father keeps a fragile balance between his daughter, who allies with the light side, and the son, who drifts ever closer to the dark.
He's drifting ever closer towards the dark. And, you know, light side, the daughter, dark side, the son, they're getting more and more powerful. So, balance, the father is getting weaker, because that's not the way of balance. So that's why the father dies eventually. And, you know, this all happens during the events of the movies, and of course, it's all directly connected. The son's power is directly connected with the power of the Sith, and the daughter's power is directly connected with the power of the Jedi in that era. So, as we talked about, the Jedi are casting too much light. You know, that's directly synonymous with, you know, in high dimensional space, essentially, with the daughter getting more powerful. It's directly connected, and the same with the son and the Sith. And, you know, they talk about this in the episode, and Pablo Hidalgo says in Secrets Revealed in 3D that the son is further into the dark side that he's ever been. He's more powerful than he's ever been. And, you know, because of that, so are the Sith, and, you know, also the Sith are also the reason why the sun is that strong as well. So it's like a feedback loop, it's all connected.
As the balance in this world crumbles, so shall war escalate in your galaxy. As my son has descended into the dark side, so have the Sith gained strength.
And I've talked about this in depth in my What Are the Ones, What Do They Do, and What Happens When They Die video. You should go and check that out, because that also ties into this video quite a lot. So the light side and dark side are stronger than ever in Phantom Menace. And of course, what is the goal of the Sith is to embody that power, embody that dark side. So Darth Maul and Darth Sidious are the embodiments of the darkness. They can draw on the full power of the imbalance, so they can draw on the full power of the darkness in the galaxy. They are the embodiments of the greatest despair. Maul's purpose is to take down the Jedi Order.
At last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we will have revenge.
You have been well trained, my young apprentice. They will be no match for you.
And indeed, on his own, Darth Maul does pose a very real threat to the Prime of the Jedi as a whole. The events of the Phantom Menace were an actual attempt for the Sith to take over the universe.
The secret was that they were patient, and they trained and studied, but they didn't make their presence known to anybody until we get to episode 1 here, where they finally make their move to try to take over the universe.
Darth Maul is as much the Phantom Menace as Darth Sidious is. He's the physical aspect. Initially, to depict this Prime of the Jedi and Prime of the Sith, George Lucas wanted to go all out with the Jedi's powers and have them going invisible at some points. And, you know, we see a glimpse of that in episode 1, where, you know, Kenobi and Qui-gon do a big fast, like, dash down the hallway, and then we never see that again in Attack of the Clones or Revenge of the Sith. And I think that's because quite early on in the production of the Phantom Menace, they hadn't actually toned it down yet. You know, they'd be shimmering with the use of the Force and going invisible and all this sort of stuff in the early stages of how George wanted to portray this Prime of the Jedi. So originally the medium was going to be a lot more exaggerated in the Phantom Menace to depict how powerful these Jedi are. But they toned that down, but it doesn't change the fact that these are still meant to be the strongest Jedi ever. It doesn't change the context that's still behind it. So the whole time the Sith have been in hiding, the Jedi have also been growing so powerful, too powerful.
The Sith were pleased by the fact that the Jedi, too, had been allowed to grow so powerful, because in the end, their sense of entitlement would blind them to what was occurring in their midst.
This is the heyday, the golden age of Jedi.
And the Prime of the Jedi doesn't even really refer to the Masters of that era. It actually refers to the Jedi Knights of that era. So the average Jedi Knight of the Phantom Menace era is more powerful than Masters of another era, is more powerful than any Jedi who lived before him. Phantom Menace Kenobi is used in the community as sort of the threshold for the Prime of the Jedi. It's because everything is about Jin and Kenobi. That's how they portray the Prime of the Jedi, is through Jin and Kenobi. Because of course they're the two people we see fight in the Phantom Menace. That's how good these guys are. These guys are that good. Phantom Menace, Kenobi, and Qui-gon Jinn. And you know, Kenobi is close to Jin already as a Padawan, and that's the progression there with the Jedi. I'll do another video and go in depth in that. But he says in the episode, there's little more you can learn from me. Kenobi is close to Qui-gon Jinn. I'm probably even a little better at fighting as well at this point. The average Padawan of the prequel era has a connection to the Force stronger than that of Masters from previous eras. And not just Masters, but the most fortunate and dedicated Masters. And that's just your average Padawan. I mean, Kenobi is a prodigy as well, you know, he's already up there with Qui-gon Jinn, he's about to get knighted. And people might think, really, like an average Padawan or knight from the prequel era is stronger than like any Jedi before, including Masters? And yeah, the reason for that, of course, is the growing of the light. There is more light side power in the galaxy. So the Jedi of this era have that whole Prime of the Jedi living force, you know, it's got the most Jedi of all time, the most powerful Jedi of all time. There's a lot more power in the galaxy, because of course the Force is a shared power. It's the power that flows through all living things, including the Jedi. So all the Jedi are more powerful individually because of that.
Obi-Wan reached out to the Force to find him, but met only the thin stirring of a barren world. It was strange to live in a galaxy now that had no Jedi in it. He hadn't realized that he had once felt a humming presence, alive with the Force ability of his fellow Jedi. It had fed him, and he hadn't even known it.
So the Phantom Menace is an era in which everything gets so fucked up that the Chosen One gets spawned in. The light side has gotten too powerful for the first time ever, so the dark side rises to take that over, and of course the dark side, in the greatest despair, is stronger than it's ever been before, embodied in the two Sith. The Jedi have become too powerful, and it's not all about power. People think, oh, the most powerful Jedi is the best Jedi. That's not necessarily true. It's not all about power. Power is corrupting. Power corrupts. And that's what's happened with the Phantom Menace Jedi, with the prequel era Jedi. And the Phantom Menace doesn't just represent that pinnacle of power, that the top of the mountain essentially, for the Jedi of the past. The Phantom Menace actually is a reference point to the golden age of the Jedi, even after the events of the original trilogy. You know, it's the point that Luke Skywalker is trying to build his order back up to. He's trying to get it back up to this golden age of the Jedi. He's trying to rekindle all of that light that went out when all the Jedi died. And that's why Vijay makes those comments in the New Jedi Order, that the New Jedi Order is essentially half-trained, a bunch of half-trained amateurs compared to the Jedi of the Phantom Menace, which was of course when Vijay was last active. Then you get the whole narrative, of course, in the New Jedi Order, where it's like, you know, if Jason uses his dark power, then maybe Jason can surpass the Jedi Knights of old. And that's described as a higher level than surpassing Luke at the time, is just surpassing these random average Jedi Knights of old, which is literally just the average Jedi Knight from the Phantom Menace era. So the Phantom Menace, the Prime of the Jedi, represents the absolute peak of Jedi power and Sith power. These guys you might not think much of because they're the guys you grew up with watching in the films, and I think first reaction when you read the comics is like, oh, this guy's well more powerful, obviously because of the way they depict power in that medium. But part of the narrative is actually that these Phantom Menace guys are the top dogs in the galactic history. And it's important to highlight that position of power as well, because the Phantom Menace acts as a threshold. Because Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, that all scales from Phantom Menace, and that's why the people from the movies, especially Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, are just insane, absolutely broken characters, is because they scale from this point of Phantom Menace, which is narratively just a point of pinnacle power for everyone. You know, this is the Prime of the Jedi, this is the greatest despair. So these guys are the top dogs, and I'm going to be doing videos of how people scale off this, what people scale to this level, all that good stuff, so we can proper pinpoint a nice accurate ranking for the Star Wars characters and map out the films and map out the expanded universe. So yeah, if you're not subscribed already, then is a sub, and I am going to be doing some videos going in depth on the individual characters from the Phantom Menace as well. So I'll do videos on Maul, I'll do videos on qui-gon, Jinn, etc., all that. So yeah, stick around and I'll see you in a bit.